So our concert on the 1st of December is very much related to the centenary of the armistice in 1918, but approaches the subject from a slightly oblique angle. We're not actually featuring music directly related to the First World War. Instead, the main item of our programme is Haydn's Mass, so-called Mass in Time of War, which he wrote when Austria was facing the threat of Napoleonic invasion. And then we're striking out from that to have another more joyful work by Haydn and also music by Vaughan Williams, who of course is a contemporary of sorts of the First World War.
Now, of course, the Haydn Mass was quite a late work, I think, for him, and it was written at a time when he'd become quite internationally famous. But at the same time, he spent quite a large part of his career on the Esterházy estate in comparable isolation.
Haydn had returned to Eisenstadt to work with the Esterházy family after some years travelling and making a great name for himself in London and elsewhere. But he comes back to Eisenstadt and has this remarkable late flowering of works. I mean, he's a man in his 80s, but he creates these glorious works, the Creation, the Seasons, and particularly these 6 great masses which he wrote for the name day of one of the Esterházy family, of which the Mass in Time of War that we're going to perform is one of those works, as is the Te Deum that begins our programme.
And of course, towards the end of his life, he was in Austria when the Napoleonic troops came in.
So Haydn's Mass takes its title in time of war because Austria was literally in terror of the threat of Napoleonic invasion. The whole of Austria had been mobilized, their armies had been doing very badly against the French in Italy and elsewhere, and I think there was a general mood of real apprehension of what might lie in store for Austria, and that's the background to this work. Though it has to be said that it doesn't infect the work entirely. It's actually, on the whole, a very exuberant work, just as so much of Haydn's music of that time was.
The Paukenmesse is a very assured work, and it shows the depth and wealth of experience that he'd gathered not only with the Esterházy family, but also during his time in London.
This Mass by Haydn, as one of his last great masses, betrays all the hallmarks of an absolute master of his craft. The handling of text, the structuring, the pacing, and particularly the brilliance of the orchestration, and in this Mass particularly the trumpets and the drums which give the Mass its nickname. They really are just absolutely on the level with the Creation and all the other works we associate with him at this time of his career.
And coming back to the Te Deum, it's a smaller scale work, obviously, but in its way, it's extremely fine and extremely developed.
The Deum's quite a short work. It was the second setting of this text that Haydn made, and it's by far the most popular and well-known of the 2 settings that he made. It's very, very tightly crafted. It's in a typical ABA structure with a brilliant beginning, a minor key prayer-like interlude in the middle before the exuberance returns very quickly, and it ends with the most magnificent and exuberant fugue, which is great fun to sing, and people love listening to it.
Well, let's talk about Vaughan Williams. Now, this, by contrast, Toward the Unknown Region, it was an early work of Vaughan Williams. I think he was in his early to mid-30s when he wrote it, and still finding his way as a composer. How does this work come across to you, and what are we trying to convey as a choir?
There's quite a nice parallel here, or a dichotomy, if you like, between Haydn, these works are right from the very end of his life, and Vaughan Williams, Toward the Unknown Region. It was pretty much his first major success as a composer, writing on a grand scale for chorus and orchestra. We've chosen not to do the Dona Nobis Pacem, which so many choirs are quite rightly singing at this time of commemoration, and gone for this work. I think it's an enormously powerful work. It's a setting of a poem of transcendent visionary brilliance by Walt Whitman, a poet who inspired Vaughan Williams, as so many of his generation, hugely. And it inspires in Vaughan Williams music of great fervour and passion, and again transcendence. It ranges through keys freely. The orchestration is magnificent, but particularly I think it's the handling of the massed voices which marks Vaughan Williams out as a composer of real standing at this stage of his career. It prefigures by 2 years his first symphony, the C Symphony, which was going to be one of his, again, a monumental success for a young composer.
And of course, it was written just a few years before the outbreak of the First World War, and Vaughan Williams himself spent much of the war in France, and then went on, of course, to write a great deal more, including all through the Second World War. He had a remarkable career.
Vaughan Williams was a composer who really thought very much of the spiritual life. Unlike Haydn, whose religious beliefs were entirely uncomplicated and devout, and he wrote "Praise be to God" at the end of every work that he wrote. Vaughan Williams had a complicated relationship with organised religion, but a deep, deep passion for the life of the soul, if you like, and that infuses his music all through his career. Particularly, one thinks of his response to John Bunyan's Pilgrim's Progress, a work which fascinated him, which he set for 40 years of his composing career. And I think this Walt Whitman poem inspires very much of the same kind of feelings in him, the passion for that, for the capability of the human soul to range far and wide, and to really infuse humanity and life. And his experiences in the war did affect him deeply. He was a stretcher bearer in the First War, and what he saw during those years really did affect him very deeply.
Let's just talk about our soloists. We've got a fantastic lineup.
We have a wonderful lineup of soloists for this work. They are 4 brilliant singers of huge intelligence and wonderfully fresh and vibrant voices. The best known of them, probably to most people, is our soprano soloist, Aidan Thomas, the Welsh soprano, perhaps best known recently for singing at the royal wedding. But the others are no less brilliant in their own way. James Way, up-and-coming young tenor who's making a great name for himself. Many in Dulwich will know our baritone soloist James Oldfield, who's a magnificent singer and teaches at Dulwich College, among other places, and a mezzo-soprano who I know very well from her work at St Margaret's, Westminster, wonderful mezzo-soprano called Lucy Goddard. Together they will make a perfect ensemble for the Haydn Mass that we're performing.